On May 10, 1802 in Massachusetts, no one could have predicted how life for Ann Macham would turn out. Her mother was the property of a white farmer whose son made her pregnant. She had no rights. She was powerless. Ann's existence as a mixed-race child was shameful to her white family. When only 15 months old, Ann was taken from her mother and sent to live with her father's white sister. She didn't see her mother again for 20 years. Her auntie didn't want her to grow up as a slave. Her circumstances did not justify being treated like an animal. When she was 12, her auntie died and she was sold to the sheriff to pay off a debt. For 3 months she was abused by him and later auctioned like cattle and wound up on the farm. Now Ann had no one. The mistress on the farm was cruel, often sending slaves into a barn to be whipped. She would even take a turn herself. Once Ann raised her arm to protect herself. The whip tore out a huge chunk of flesh. Some of Ann's wounds never healed and she was scarred for life. The owners did not beat their slaves on the faces, not out of kindness, but because they wanted to preserve their value.
Slaves were often locked up for long periods. Ann decided to run away. She knew that if captured, she would be beaten to death. But a friend, who was slave to the harbour master, agreed to help Ann stow away on a ship. One night the mistress had gone out. This was Ann's chance. She worked loose the nails of the window in the room where she was locked up with 2 other slaves. She could just squeeze through the gap. She hid in the woods nearby for 6 weeks, living on berries and pieces of bread left behind by her friend. Her disappearance was soon discovered, and a search party scoured the woods on horseback with sniffer dogs. The dogs found Ann, but she had always petted them in the past, so they did not give her away. She tied her frock tight around her legs and wrapped a shawl around her head and neck to stop the snakes from biting her if she fell asleep. Her friend again came to the rescue, hiding her in a hayloft filled each day with the harvested hay. She was almost buried alive, but managed to wriggle through the heavy dampness to breathe.
Finally, Ann got the news she'd been praying for. A ship was coming up the river. Her friend knew the mate and she could be smuggled to safety. One dark night, she slipped silently through the woods, down to the river. Her friend's husband hid her in the little boat and rowed out to the waiting ship. The mate smuggled her on board and she was hidden amongst a cargo of casks. She had almost no food and was eaten alive by mosquitoes. She could barely move in the cold, dark dampness, and she had to stay hidden for the entire sea crossing. She was almost discovered several times by the custom officers and the police. She even heard the captain reading out the reward that was being offered for her, dead or alive, declaring to all the crew that he would not have her for any money on the ship. If caught, she was done for. The journey was almost 4 months of incredible hardship that included stormy seas where she must have been tossed around for hours. Eventually the ship docked at Flushing in the Netherlands. It was wartime and it was hard to find a safe passage across the sea to England. The ship's mate begged the stevedore to find a safe place for Ann. Once again, the people risked their lives to save her.
Eventually, Ann travelled across the North Sea to Grimsby. She then went to York and on by coach to North Shields, where she arrived on Christmas Day 1831. Ann was met by 2 young women. They were members of a religious organisation called the Quakers, who believed slavery should be abolished. After 10 days, she went to live in a lodging house in Tynemouth. She was baptised and moved to Howard Street, working as a servant for the Spence family. Ann married a local man, James Blythe, a rope maker. The area, Lowtown, was a poor, disease-ridden place, but the air must have smelt sweet to Ann because North Shields meant freedom from slavery. Ann's story is one of courage and bravery in the face of great hardship and cruelty. She was helped by many different people. She is buried in Preston Cemetery, but her legacy lives on. And sadly, even though it is in a different form, so does unfairness, intolerance, and even slavery today. But her story shows that together we can change that.